So first of all, welcome everybody to the first one of our webinars. We've got a few of these webinars planned for the next couple of weeks. But this one is sort of one from the Honours Council to kick things off. So those that don't recognise or know me, I'm Chris Halliwell, the Chair of Honours. The Honours team is made up of a few people waiting to go in. I'll just keep on doing this. So trying to do some multitasking. So we have Cindy from Nelson. We have Mike from, are you Twizel now, Mike? Yeah, I think he's Twizel down the south. And then Belinda from the Wairarapa. So there's four of us at the moment. And we're the ones beavering behind the scenes, getting everything ready for Iris and all the other bits and pieces for the awards. So the team's been quite busy. You'll may be aware we actually got the Iris rules out just before Christmas, and then the call for entries came out probably 4 weeks ago, and entries are actually open at the moment, so which is all good. Still got more people coming through, and I think there's about just over 5 weeks left for entries until they close. So we thought it was a good idea to have a bit of a chat around some of the questions that people have got, and yeah, we'll go from there. So we'll start with the questions that have been posted already or sent to us directly. If you do have questions throughout the session, please put them in the chat. And my guys will be looking at those and making sure we answer them throughout the call. That's probably the easiest way rather than unmuting and talking. It's probably easier just to post them in the chat. And if we need to, we can have a discussion around them anyway as we go through. So let me just, get started. So I suppose one of the first things that I'd like to talk about is, and what we've got some questions about, is around some of the big key changes that were made for 2024. So it's really important, and I can't stress enough to read the call for entries document. The questions we've had come through, most of the answers are actually in the document themselves. When putting the document together, we sort of had a mindset of how can we grow the awards? My philosophy and our philosophy is that we'd like, I suppose, the Iris Awards and the awards that we run to be the biggest and the best in New Zealand. So we're constantly looking at how can we grow the awards and what can we do to grow the awards, get new entrants, get different types of photography in there and everything else like that. So those are some of the key philosophies that we've got that are driving some of the decisions that we're actually making in there. So first one is, now that you may be aware, there is no limit on entry numbers. So you can enter as many images as you like. Last year, there used to be a limit of 12. That has now been removed. What will happen and still happen is, though, if you do enter more than 10 images, only your top 10 images will count for distinction points if you're eligible for distinction points. So that's the points that go towards being like a Grand Master or Master of Photography or Associate of Photography in the distinction levels. So you can enter as many as you like, but only your top 10 will count. And the reasoning why we've taken that limit off is I don't like limits. We don't like limits. We want to grow things. And if people have got images in there and want to enter 20 images, by all means, enter 20 images. If you want to enter 4, that's cool. You can enter 4. If you've got award-winning images, why limit it to just 10 or 12? So we've removed that, so you can enter as many as you like. They can go into any category, just like last year as well. So there's no limit on what category they can go into either. In doing that, we've also looked at introducing a newborn category. So this year, there is brand new category, never had a newborn category before, and there's been quite a lot of, I suppose, requests for this. You may or may not be aware that each year we have a survey that goes out after the awards, and for the last few years, a newborn category has been asked by our members to actually have, and so we've introduced that now, and really it's to photographers, some of the people that were entering newborn photography were feeling that their images didn't really fit the other categories that well, or showcase that skill or genre or photography. So brand new category. So I encourage all the newborn photographers out there, get entries into there, because it's a brand new category, can be the first newborn photographer of New Zealand for the year. One of the other changes we've made this year is in relation to the commercial category. So last year, commercial, or any of the entries being in the commercial category, had to be commissioned. This year, they don't have to be commissioned. And the reasoning for changing that is sort of twofold. Again, the feedback from the surveys coming through that photographers didn't want them to have to be all commissioned work. Some of the photographers felt that by having solely commissioned work, it limited their skill sets of what they could put in there. It limited the types of images that they could put in there. It limited their creativity. Sometimes, not all times, but sometimes the commercial work is not as creative as other work and other things they're actually doing. So by removing that, it allows the creativity to be in there. Also, some commercial photographers will actually go out there and pitch to new customers. So they will actually create some work which is completely uncommissioned, or go out there to show that work to new customers. That work may not actually be picked up by that client, but they may actually get those clients and carry on. And so that work then can actually still be used. So again, also comes back to, taking some of the limits off and encouraging more entries into those categories. Okay, another one that another change that we've made this year, and this was really stemmed from how the working behind the scenes and what actually goes on. So if you're entering an image and it's going to be printed and you want it to have a black mat, which is all perfectly fine. This year, though, that entry must be in a plastic sleeve. So we've found, and I found this last year working behind the scenes, that, and people may not know this, but when the prints are organised, they're organised into sort of the order that they're shown. And so you may have had all black mats in your portfolio of, let's say, 12 images that you entered last year, and it'd be fine. So black upon black, which is all good. But when they get separated out there, you can find the black mats are touching against the white mats because we put them face to face and back to back. And so those black mats can actually mark the white mats. And we were finding that we're having to put sleeves in between them, pieces of tissue paper in between them to stop any of the black mats marking the white ones. So to save time for everybody and save damage and save the stress behind the scenes, anybody that's entering a black mat, it must go into a plastic sleeve. It will be returned in that plastic sleeve as well. Okay. Another change that we've looked at.
Could I just jump in there for a moment, Chris? If you are looking for somewhere to get sleeves from, Conservation Supplies in the Hawke's Bay is the place to go to get those.
Yep. They're just down the road from me. And I think they also may be attending the photography show this year. I think I heard words that they will be maybe sponsoring and having a table there. So if you haven't met them, you can meet them. But they sell lots of wonderful different things for photographers, including the plastic sleeves and other backing boards and bits and pieces. So good place to get them.
Chris, there was a question in the chat just asking if it's preferred that people use white mats, or does it not make a difference that they can use black or white?
It's entirely up to you what mat you would like to use. You could use any color you like. My only comment on that would be make sure there's a purpose to whatever color you choose. If you wanted to have, let's say, a pink mat or an orange mat, you could. There's nothing stopping you from a rules perspective, but just make sure the image suits that and there's a reasoning why there's an image, you've chosen that. Going back on history, the majority of them have been white, but that doesn't stop black mats, you know, and other mats scoring well and doing well. Just there needs to be a reasoning behind it. But totally allowed
There's
to
someone
the rules.
waiting room to come into.
Oh, I am off. Let me just admit them. Cool. Thank you for letting me know. Have I got anybody else? I think that's everybody in the waiting room. Cool. For those of you that are just joining and have missed bits and pieces, we are recording this, and yeah, you'll be able to go back on the recording to have a look at some of those questions and bits and pieces that you've missed. Okay, another I suppose new initiative that we're launching this year is the full print service. So in other words, when you are entering your images into AwardForce, and we're talking obviously print images, you have the option then to actually select the full service. Full details of this are on page 37 of the call for entries. But in essence, what this means is that that NZIPP will arrange a printer for you, and your image will get printed, matted, delivered to Christchurch, and then obviously returned back to you as well. If this service has been picked up by international people, there might be some additional costs for the international return. But this is a trial for this year. For people that are worried about, you know, maybe first-time entrants, first-time printers, first-time getting images printed, this could be a good option for you. Or people that are really busy and not sure where to go, this is a good option for people. We are utilising printers who have had a long history inside printing for the Iris Awards, so you can trust them. One is myself, and one is Rachel Smith from Palmerston North. I think between the two of us, we worked on something like 45% of all prints last year. So yeah, so when you go through there, you will see you'll have the option of selecting whether you want that service or not. It'll cover the price that you'll get charged right up front, will cover your entry fee. It'll cover your professionally printed and matted image. It'll cover delivery to the venue for the judging, and it will cover the return delivery to your home address for New Zealand and Australian entrants, additional fees for international entrants who are not collecting their prints from Christchurch. Yeah, so there's full details on page 37. We've had some good feedback about this already, and I think it'll be quite a popular service. So it takes the hassle out of printing or worrying about your printing, and also for international people, it would take the hassle out of having to post them away quite early and worrying about them getting through customs, because they'll all be taken care of locally in New Zealand. Okay, moving right along.
Before we do, Chris, can we just got a question there about the cost for that?
So the cost for that varies depending upon the cost of what level you're coming in. So in other words, if you're it's all related to whether you are a how do I put this? So if you're an accredited member, right, versus whether you are an associate member, versus whether you are a non-member. So they'll all have different costing levels. The same printing price will be added on top of all of those. So have a look on page, I think that page, what did I say it was, page 37. So 37 dictates or tell more detail of that, and it will have all of the different costs in there. So yeah, it does vary. I can't give you a simple one answer cost, because it will vary depending upon what level you're actually, you know, the entry fee for your print as well, or your entry. Cool. Okay. Changes to the animal category. So this year, the animal category is no longer defined as animals that are farmed or domesticated. So it's opened it right up. In essence, wildlife animals are now permitted. Yeah, so that's any animal basically is permitted inside that category. There are some rules around there, and I do stress you to read those if you're entering those into that category. There are some rules around there around, you know, what I suppose ethics when dealing with domesticated animals, ethics with dealing with wild animals and things like that. So, you know, wild animals aren't to be handled or do anything to, you know, cause injury or distress to them as well, or to their habitat. So have a look at those rules and read them. They're quite important. It's all around sort of the ethics. They'll be in the nature rules as well. But please just be aware that, you know, the animal category now has been expanded from not only farm and domesticated, it's all wildlife or all animals. One thing to remember, and I'll say this, and it applies to every category as well. Remember to consider the category rules in conjunction with the global rules, right? So you need to read the global rules, which are at the front, and they cover every single category, and then you can cover your category rules. Another change we've made for this year is when you're uploading your images, we actually have put a limit inside the system for when you're uploading your files. So you can refer to pages 35 and 36 of the call for entries in here. So your file needs to be under 25 megabytes, right? 3,000 pixels on the longer side. So if you're having trouble uploading your images, it could be because you're trying to upload an image that is bigger than 25 megabytes. We had a number of images last year, and the reason why we put this on here, the back-end system doesn't deal with images that are bigger than 25 megabytes. And so it creates a lot of extra time and work for us because we have to contact the photographer, get an image that's been downsized, and then it has to be re-uploaded again. So yeah, if you're having troubles uploading your images, it could be because of your trying to upload an image that is bigger than the file size that is actually allowable in the system. But all stated in pages 35 and 36 of the call for entries. Another change that we've put through there is all files, and so, you know, it's been standard practice for a few years now that we request copies of all the capture files, so all the raw files, all the elements that you've used. In the past, you've been able to utilize either send them in with a USB stick, a Dropbox, a Google Drive, various different ways. So this year we are requesting or making it mandatory that all files will go into the Dropbox. So there's lots of details on there about page 34. And I think Mike has also done a video around that, which is in the Facebook group. So go and have a look at that as well, which steps you through. It just means that all files are in one place for us. So if we have to look for a file, whether it's during the vetting, before the awards, whether it's during the actual awards, if something comes up and we need to check something, we've got one place to actually go to find everything. So you must have had all of your files. There is a little tick box inside Award Force when you're entering in there to say that you've actually already uploaded your images. So by the time you submit your images, right, and complete everything, all of your original capture files need to be uploaded into Dropbox, and there are certain ways of actually putting them in there into the folders and what you actually need and labeling them. So please read page 34. It is pretty straightforward, but it just needs to be put into the Dropbox. Okay. So one of the other big things that we've introduced this year, which you may or hopefully you're aware of, we've now got, so there'll be 2 awards that are running simultaneously. We have the Iris Awards, which is for professionals, and we also have the Amateur Awards. So the Amateur Awards are brand new, being run by NZIPP. And so there have been some questions asked around which one do I actually enter? Do I enter the amateur or do I enter Iris? And so the amateurs is really for amateur photographers. We've deemed that as being people that have not entered IRIS before, okay, and are also not accredited or not accredited members. So if you haven't entered IRIS before, but you're an accredited NZIPP member, then you can't enter. If you haven't entered before, then you IRIS before, then you can actually enter into the amateurs. Just looking at, if you're from overseas, so if you're Australia or international, then you can't obviously enter the amateurs. That's only for New Zealand people living in New Zealand. You can't enter both, right? So you can't enter both the amateurs and IRIS. We've had one person or a couple of people already try to enter both. So you'll have to make a decision of which one you actually want to enter. You can't enter both, unfortunately. Cool.
Chris, there's someone else in the waiting room to come in if you.
Thank you. Cool, just letting them join in. Brilliant. Let's wait for them to join. Cool. Sorry about those people waiting and having long trouble getting in. Like I said before, this has been recorded, so you'll be able to go back and have a look at the first, what are we doing, 20 minutes so far, and all the questions that have been asked or been answered that we've got in there as well. Cool. One big also difference between the amateur awards and, let's say, the IRIS awards, the amateurs are only digital, right? So you can only enter digital awards. If you're wanting to enter prints, then you can't enter those into amateurs. They would go into IRIS. I think for the majority of the people that maybe we've got on this call, we're all used to the IRIS awards and professionals. The amateurs are really to try and bring out and encourage new photographers to join and really, go back to that the purpose of what I stated at the beginning. We really want to grow the awards, and we really want to make these awards the biggest and best in New Zealand, and bringing a competition for amateur photographers into there really helps with that, and really grow, I suppose, the industry in New Zealand as a whole. And cool. A big topic, but is AI, right? And I think it's a big topic, generally speaking. I was coming home from work today, and on the radio they were talking about AI and dating apps, and how that can affect dating apps and work. And I think we're hearing AI all over the place, and it's all good. So from a photographic perspective and from an awards perspective, we'll touch on it very briefly, and really how does it affect us and how are we dealing with it in the awards. And it's really quite simple. One of the key elements in our rules is that all elements and content must be 100% photographic and must be the work of the entrant. So that includes your textiles, your brushes, your borders, your overlays, and everything else like that. So that, in essence, means that anything that's created by AI is not doesn't meet that rule, right? So it doesn't meet being 100% photographic, and it's not being the work created by the actual entrant. So anything AI is not allowed, right? That is the clearest way that I can actually say it. Right, and I suppose the simplest way that we can actually articulate that. So no element can be computer generated or created by artificial intelligence. You can use things. The line does get blurred, right? And I do understand that. There is some fancy stuff inside Photoshop, right? And we're probably using it, cloning and even the heel brush, right? Those things are fine as long as they are within the right category and the rules within the right category. So if those things are allowed, but creating something, generating something that's not photographic as to be part of the element or in the image is just not allowed. If we identify that or discover that, then those images will be disqualified. it's as simple as that.
Chris, there was a question in the chat about using the AI masking tools or AI denoise in Lightroom. Is that okay?
Good question. So I'm just thinking about this. So you're using the AI to create a mask. My gut feeling on that is yes, that's perfectly fine because you're not actually creating content, right? It's what you then do with that mask, right? So then if you then got AI to create a sky background for you or whatever it was that you put in there, that's not allowed. The denoising tools and things like that, that's fine. I have no issues with that. You're not really creating content or creating elements inside the actual image. You're dealing with pixels that are already there, so to speak. So yeah, that's fine. I suspect I suspect as time goes on, that's going to be an interesting topic for us to deal with just in competitions and how we deal with that going forward. But this is where we are at the moment. Paul, we've had some questions around entering film images, and how can that be dealt with? Even we have digital images, we have print images. You can utilize a film negative in any which way to create one of those. Perfectly fine. There's no issues with that whatsoever. So you're welcome to enter film images into the awards. Have a look at pages 38 to 42 in the call for entry. It talks about, I suppose, how to create the required files that will be needed, because you'll still need to, if you're using film and you need to create a print, you'll need, unless you're developing your own negative, you'll need a digital file to be printed, which is all perfectly fine, but you'll still need to provide a digital file to us for vetting, and to be used in the slideshows and things like that. So have a look at pages 38 to 42. We've got some quite, I suppose, good instructions in there around how to, I suppose, prepare your files and what you can do for film entries, because you do need to supply a digital version for us inside the system and when you're entering, and so we can vet it and things like that. We understand that you won't actually have a raw file, so to speak. Like I shoot with Canon, so I have .cr2 files, right? They're all different types of files, but you won't actually have a raw file. So creating a scan of that negative that you're using from your film is perfectly fine and perfectly acceptable to be classified as your raw entry or your raw file that you'll submit. Yeah, so they'll need to go into Dropbox as well, just like anything else. Cool. I will just a couple of mentions here, and this applies to everything in general. Please be aware of the cutoff time, right? So you must have entered online before 11:59 p.m. on Sunday, the 23rd of June. Right. So it is a Sunday, which is great. It's basically the end of Sunday. We always have people that are in the process of having the entries and they miss that deadline. All right. No matter when we set the deadline, whether we set it at 10 o'clock at night, 8 o'clock at night, or midnight, people are going to miss it. So just be aware of what that deadline actually is to not miss it. I personally would say get your entries in early. That last weekend is usually very there's a lot of entries come in and it puts a lot of strain on the actual award force system, and you don't want anything to go wrong in the system side of things and to not allow you to actually enter for whatever reason. So I would say get your entries in early and don't wait to the last moment. And if you're entering prints, then they need to be delivered or arranged to have them delivered to Christchurch between the 8th and the 26th of July. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So we've had some other questions come through, which is all good, around what category should my image go in? And in essence, that's not an answer that we can answer. We can't tell you what category to put it in. But what we can say to you that if your image meets the category rules for multiple categories, then it's up to you as the entrant to decide which one to actually put that in there, based on which category you think it best suits, right? So yeah, we can't give you guidance on what category to put it in there. Read the rules, read the call for entry, see which ones it actually sits in. If you think it sits in multiples, then have a look at some of the suggestions we've got in there. Maybe also have a look at the past year's images to see if there's similar images and where they're actually seated into what category. But it's entirely up to you as to which category they go in there. We've got a couple of questions around can headshots and personal branding images go into commercial? Yes, they can. Right, there's nothing stopping them going into there whatsoever. We've also had some questions around do birth photos go in newborn or documentary? And in essence, it could go in either, depending upon the image, as long as the image meets the post-production rules and the criteria for documentary. So documentary has a lot stricter rules than what newborn would have. So you'll have to just read those rules, have a look at the criteria that are actually in there. If it meets both of them, then it's entirely up to you which one you put it. You may find it may not meet the documentary rules because of the post-production that you've done on it, and then the decision's made and it will go into newborn for you. Cool. Remember, for newborn, while other people are allowed in the photo, to give it context, the focus must be on the newborn. Whereas in in documentary, it doesn't actually have to be. It can be a wider fit. Cool. Some other category-specific questions. Do images in the newborn category have to be commissioned? Nope, they don't have to be commissioned. This is not a requirement whatsoever. This is a good one, actually. Are HDR images allowed in the landscape category? So yes, as long as it again maintains the authenticity, I have trouble with that word, of the scene. So if you have a look at the rules inside the landscape categories, it talks about maintaining the authenticity of the scene. So as long as your HDR does that, then it's perfectly fine. So there's nothing stopping you. There's nothing technically in the rules stopping an HDR. It needs to meet the other rules inside that category as well. Are composites allowed in the animal category? Yes, they are, as long as all the elements are photographic and have been taken and edited by the entrant. So again, nothing technically stopping you from entering a composite. You just need to go, does it meet all the other parts of the rules? Like, all of the elements for that composite need to be yours. They need to be photographic, taken by the entrant, and then all the post-production being done by the entrant as well. Cool. Is cropping and rotation of an image allowed in categories such as landscape, portrait, or documentary where there are restrictions on post-production? Yes, they are. Right, nice and simple and easy. There's nothing stopping you cropping, and there's nothing stopping you doing any rotations whatsoever, and that could be flipping or mirroring or anything else like that as well. Cool. Can we use third-party editing software plugins such as Portraiture for skin editing, Nik software for black and white or colored edits, DxO Pure Raw for sharpening, etc.? So in answering that, 100% of the post-production work must be done by the entrant. So while the use of third-party editing software is allowed to be used in order to do your editing, the using purchase presets is not. Right, so you can use the tools if you're fine, but you can't purchase presets which you're then pushing a button and it's going off and doing the editing for you. So as long as you're using those tools manually, perfectly fine.
Chris, there's just a question in the chat about the last one when we were talking about the landscape category and the authenticity of the scene.
Yes.
And they've just asked if we can sort of elaborate what do we mean by that a bit more.
Yeah, good question. What do we mean by that? So Mike, feel free to pop in here, but what I would turn around and say is, does the final image that you take look like the raw, or the raw image, or the image that you first took, or the scene as it was viewed? Right? I think that's what we're trying to say in there. Now, remembering there are two different types, there are two different categories for landscape, right? And there are stricter rules in one than there are in the others. So you need to read the category rules to find out which ones you can and can't, what you can and can't do inside each of the different categories. But in essence, what we're looking for here is a true representation of that landscape. Mike, do you have anything further to add that sums it up?
No, I think that's pretty much it in a nutshell. So your capture file needs to match, the scene that you're looking at the time. So it's a realistic landscape, and then the way you process it needs to be authentic to that scene as well. So authentic basically means realistic, just the same sort of language.
Cool. Yeah, where was I? Ah, yes, here I am. I was going to jump ahead actually, but so and I really, this is quite an interesting well, a good question actually. And a couple of years ago, I think I actually had the same question myself. So can I enter an image from the same shoot so can I enter an image from the same shoot where one of those images before has been entered, right? But not the same actual file. I mean, I'm confusing that. I'll read it actually as it says rather than ad-libbing. Can I enter an image from the same shoot that have been entered in previous years that is similar but not the same, with a different take on editing or style? So, in essence, you cannot enter an image that has been previously entered, right? So into the awards, but you can enter an image from the same shoot that have been entered that hasn't been entered in previous years. So in other words, if it's a completely different file, and the example I used actually, it was actually for myself when I asked this question. So it was a wildlife shot, right? I was using rapid fire, and so between, I might have had 15 frames that all look very, very similar, right? Or just ever so slightly moving. And I entered one frame in 1 year, and then I wanted to use a different frame in a triptych type of image as part of it. And so I actually asked that question, can it be used, even though it's similar? As long as it's a different frame, and so it meets the rule because it hasn't already been entered. So you can. That was probably a long-winded way around saying that. One related to that is, can I use the same model in more than one image? Right. So there is the same subject rule. So while the same subject may be used across multiple entries in a single year, your entries must be, and this is the key point, unique and distinct from each other, both visually and conceptually. Right. So the subject must not be recognizable as being in the same location, moment, or time, or depicted similarly. So if you could use the same model, they just have to be completely different shoots, they have to be different times, and they have to look different as well. So if you did two portraits, let's say of me for argument's sake, right, one sitting here and then one outside, right, that's not different, right? Yes, it's a different time, but it's actually not different. It's just two portraits of me, right? So we would say you've used the same model twice. If I did one of me sitting here and then one, let's say a slow shutter speed where I was actually moving, but you used a flash and you blurred all the background, blurred my movement, but you captured my face so you could see that it was actually still me. So technically speaking, that's different, right? And so we would allow that. So you can use the same model, right, or same subject. It just needs to be different from each of those images. Yeah, they need to be unique and distinct from each other, I think, and both visually and conceptually. It's that visually and conceptually that makes the difference. Okay, we've had some questions around the term series. So what does the term series mean in regards to an entry, e.g. a diptych or triptych? So what we're talking about here, because you can so a series is basically multiple images presented together in one entry in order to tell a story, right? Yeah, so you might have single entries, single images, like a diptych, and you can put 3 of them together, and that makes up a series, right? There was confusion around, or questions around, the difference between a series of images and things like multiple exposure images, right? So in some categories, you aren't allowed to use multiple exposures, but you can have a series. So you can have separate images, right, to make up a series. It could be a grid of 3, it could be a grid of 2, it could be a grid of 9. They're all individual images that make up your story or your series. A multiple exposure would be multiple exposures all into one image. That would be, let's say, one part of a series, maybe, if you had multiples of them. And so you need to read the rules and the category rules there of which ones are allowed and which ones aren't. But a series, in essence, is just multiple images put together into one entry. Another one which comes up quite often, actually, is, can I take photos of illustrations, artwork, and use them in my entry? In other words, let's say I had a picture on the wall that I wanted to use. So can I photograph that and then use that in my entry? So there's a couple of things in here. So firstly, you have to read the category rules and see whether composite images are allowed. So not all categories allow composite images. But for the categories that do allow that, right? Yeah, you could do that. The key thing there, though, is, do you actually have the permission, right, or the permission of the person that does have the copyright? So in other words, are you able to actually reproduce that artwork, or reproduce that whatever it is you're taking a photo of, or artworks, right? So you must have the permission of, you either must have the copyright or have the permission of the person that does have the copyright to actually do that. But technically speaking, from the rules perspective, there's nothing stopping you if composites are allowed. Yeah. So a really interesting question, actually, and I'll take a bit of time talking about this topic, and it will lead on to probably a couple of other ones. But so the questions come up: is it possible to score high if you only submit digital images and not prints? So we have engaged so Helen Smith, who is a member and is doing, I think it's a PhD or a doctorate in stats and statistics. And so she has been looking at the last 3 years worth of information around from IRIS, from the judging and the scores and things like that, and poring over, I think, I don't know, thousands, maybe tens of thousands of bits of pieces of data to see whether there are any trends, whether there are any anomalies that we should be looking at. And so statistically speaking, so we've had this data come back, which is actually really good. It's only just come back just recently, and we're starting to pour through it. So it was really good timing that someone's asked this question. And I'll read it from a statistical perspective, because then I think you get a good understanding. So on average, from the 3 years that we've looked at, print score slightly higher than digital images for each year. However, both entry types average in the bronze range between 75 and 80. So I think that's really important to actually understand, that both of them average between 75 and 80, but there can be a slight year on year, a slight, I suppose, the print score slightly higher, but still within 75 to 80. So in essence, if someone was to now ask me that, do prints score higher than digitals? My answer to that would be, statistically speaking, no, they don't. They all fit within that 75 to 80 range. They're all within the same, on average, that same award range, which I think is really quite interesting to actually understand. Yes, there are discrepancies between them when you start to look at different categories and things like that. But also some categories favor more prints than digitals. Some categories favour more digitals than actual prints as well. So I just want to see if there's either some data in here. Yeah. What you also find is a lot of because digital entries are relatively new. I think they came in with COVID in 2020. I think was the first year or around that time that digital came in with COVID because we couldn't run Iris being all together, and so we couldn't have prints. But a lot of photographers that are entering are used to entering prints and prints only, and you'll find a lot of the photographers that are aiming to go out there and win a category or aiming to go out there and do really well, they will be taking the time and entering prints. So you might find that you might look at them and look at the differences between some of the prints and digitals and higher scores and things like that. But a lot of the category winners and things like that are coming for they're entering prints rather than entering digitals. But really, I'll go back to really interesting to find that both on average over the last 3 years, that both prints and digitals both fell within that bronze range. The average was between 75 and 80, which I found quite fascinating, actually. Another question that we get also and is around, does it matter which day or which time of day that my image gets judged? So in other words, does it matter especially if it's a big category, if my image is coming up in the morning versus my image is coming up in the afternoon? Does it matter whether my image is judged on day 1 or if it's judged on day 3, right? Or if I'm the last category to be judged on day 3 and it's towards the afternoon, is that going to mean that those entries are going to be lower scored than the ones that were judged on the first day and the first morning? So it was really interesting again, and Helen spent some good time looking at that. And there really is no major difference in the averages or the range of scores or awards given between the days, nor is there the difference in the number of challenges as well. Or is there any differences in the actual scoring ranges and things like that? So in layman's terms, I would look at that and go, it doesn't make a difference whether your category is the first category to be judged, the last category to be judged, or whether you are the first image or the last image. There's nothing statistically in there showing trends, which is really interesting to know and quite pleasing from my perspective to actually understand as well. Our judges are doing a good job and not getting tired, is really what that's saying. I think that was the last of the questions that I had. It isn't it?
There was a question in the chat, Chris, about the pre-judging for digitals and what would happen. Why would there be pre-judging, and if there is, what are the criteria for the ones that will go through to be live judged?
So good question. So in the call for entries, it states that so that all prints will go through to be live judged. Just to give a bit of background, in essence, with 3 judging rooms running over 3 days, with the amount of judges that we have, we can only physically handle about 1,400 to 1,500 images, right? So those judges can really only sit there and judge over the 3 days with 3 judging rooms, with the amount of judges being 1,400 and 1,500 images. So last year, I think we ended up with 1,450 images, and that meant that was across both print and digital, so everything could go through to live judging. If we get into a situation where, so this year where we have more, let's say we get 1,800 entries coming in of mixture of both prints and digitals, it means we can't take everything to live judging. We don't have the capacity with 3 rooms over 3 days to live judge everything. So the first criteria that we've said is that all prints will go through. What would happen then to the digitals is that all digital images would be prejudged. So we would have a panel of 5 judges. They would go through all of the digital images. They would score them just like they would on Iris. The average will be worked out, and then we would work out how many images we can take through. So let's say we can handle 1,500 images, and we get, let's say, 1,000 prints, which means we can have 500 digitals. If we had a total of 700 digitals, once the average was done, the top 500, right, would actually go through to be live judged. So that's in essence how that would work. We may not get into that situation this year, but we are planning for it just in case we actually do. So in essence, that's the process. All digitals would get pre-judged, 5 judges, same scoring system. They would be averaged, and then the top, whatever it takes to be to make us up to that 1,500, would go through to live judging. Hopefully that answers that question. If somebody is looking there and thinking, and I'm thinking about the same thing too, what happens if we got 2,000 print entries? What will we do? We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Yeah. It would be a good situation to be in. It would cause us some stress and some headaches, but there is that, I'll say, loophole that is out there at the moment. But yeah, I say bring it on, and let's try to, yeah, let's see what happens.
Well, there's an easy question, Chris, around the age limit. So there was an indication last year in some of the documentation that the age limit would revert to 2 years from this year onwards. So that we've scrubbed that. So it's still 5 years, which means anything from 1st of January 2019 is eligible.
Yep. So we've kept that 5-year limit. Yeah. So that didn't change. Cool. Any other questions from people?
Yeah, there's another one from if you've got 3 great photos of one subject from a shoot, so just coming back to the same subject rule, how I'm just going to scroll back up and make sure I've got it. Can you only enter one of them into one category? So the thing to remember there is it's across the whole awards, not just one category. So you can't take 2 images of the same subject shot the same way and go, I'll put one in animal, one in nature, and have a bob each way. It's you've got to pick that one shot to go through. So it's quite a good question, because if you are looking at that, that's something you might be thinking of doing, but it doesn't work that way, unfortunately.
Oh, I see there's a question in there about images that go through to the next round. And your that's talking about going through to live judging. So if we had to, let's say, do some pre-judging and one of your images didn't go through to live judging, it's still, the score is still counted, right? So your average score is still counted, and it would still be eligible for to count towards the top 3 of your, say, set for finals. Yeah. It's still a live score, and you could still get distinction points off it and everything else like that. It just wouldn't go through to the live judging, but it's still in there, and would still,
it won't be rescored.
Yeah, it won't be rescored, and that score would just count. What happens with the digital, and just to elaborate on that a fraction more, what happens to the ones that do go through to live judging? Their scores are wiped, right, and completely rejudged again. So we just use that. For the ones that go through to live judging, we use that pre-judging to, in other words, work out the top, whatever it happens to be, to make up to our 1,500 or make up to however many we can actually live judge, and then their score, then they're completely started from scratch again.
I've got a question here. Why can photographers not enter photos of their own families into the family photography category, with commercial now being open to uncommissioned surely family photography should allow photographers to enter their own families. For
Um,
many photographers, it's now a personal project area.
Yep, good question. We are looking at the rules for a couple of categories, especially for next year. So there could be, yeah, at the moment, family category is, if I correct me if I'm wrong, is commissioned and commissioned only, right? And excludes, let's say, family members. Yeah. The family category was really introduced to, I suppose, ideally show off the skill sets of photographers for the, I won't say it, well, for the family work that's been done out there, right? That it's been given to clients and the everyday work, so to speak, that is actually out there for the family photographers. And at that particular time, it was deemed that, family members, relatives, and things like that can't be used. Yeah, so that is one of the areas that we are looking for next year. You might find a change, there might not be a change, but at the moment you can't use family and it must be commissioned.
Yes, I mean, equally, we've had feedback that it should be from commissioned shoots from family photographers. So there's both sides presenting arguments there.
Is that another question, Chris, about stitched images in the landscape category, which was one of the changes for this year as well?
Yes, it is. Yep. So stitched images, so panoramics are now allowed, and also allowed, I think, also in nature as well. They weren't included in nature last year, or yeah. So, but yes, panoramics, so stitched images are allowed into the landscape and nature categories.
And that's all we've got so far.
That's brilliant. And that's sort of bang on. Look at that, 7:59. So just in wrapping up, thank you for everybody that joined. Thank you for your questions. It's been great. If you have any other questions, don't hesitate to email us those questions. Was it honours at, I don't even know our email address, honours@nzipp.org.nz. Look at that. So email them through. Best to email them through directly to that email address rather than emailing them to us personally or messaging us personally. That this way we can actually keep a track of what's actually been questions and them coming through. So we take those questions into account when we're looking at the rules and things like that for next year's. If they come through our private ones, they can be missed. But yeah, keep your questions coming through. If you've got any questions, don't hesitate to ask us. This is the first of a series of webinars. The next one is on Sunday, I believe, at 7 o'clock with Chris Saunders. So for those who don't know, he took out the Australian Photographer of the Year last year, does some amazing aerial photos and bits and pieces. So brilliant talk. We've got Kelly Brown coming up, I think, next week as well. We've got Catherine Cadanak. We've got Amber Griffin, so who took out New Zealand Photographer of the Year last year. And we have named Karina, I think it is, who took out the award for the highest scoring images for a new entrant. So lots to listen to, get involved with over the next couple of weeks. So join in, listen to those people, get inspired, create images and enter them. Thank you to my team that's helped put everything together. Cindy, Mike, Belinda, you're doing an amazing job. So thank you very much. Yeah, we'll see you all on Sunday. Thank you.